there's a stigma around estate planning that's only for wealthy people, which millennials these days, depending, not the greatest holders of wealth these days. So where does that stigma come from, and why should millennials even care in the first place about estate planning? Like for someone who's just starting their career, 24, 25, 26 years old, still renting, why should they care about estate planning?
Because at the end of the day, you still have stuff tied to your name. Secondly, you should care about estate planning because if you love other people, you don't want to make their life a living hell when you pass away. And that is what happens, unfortunately. I've seen it with clients. I've seen it with family members where if somebody doesn't have their estate plan buttoned up, they don't have their wishes laid out, even if they have 5 grand in a checking account, a couple social media accounts, they pay rent and have a 1 bedroom with all their life belongings that can fit in 600 square foot. I mean, it's still a process, to clean up. And people, too, what I always say with millennials is even if you're not married, um, plan for what you want to have with your stuff. You might have employer-based life insurance. Who's that going to go to? It might be your retirement accounts. Who is that going to go to? But more importantly, having that power of attorney designation, which gives a family member or a friend that opportunity to take care of you if you're in the hospital, if you can't pay your bills, those items, that's such a huge piece just to make sure that your life is okay and you're in good shape. Because again, the court's going to decide who does it. And let's say, for example, your next best choice per the court's decision is your mother, who's 87 years old and lives across the country. And now all of a sudden your mom has to fly at 87 years old, handle your stuff, or, go to the doctor, make decisions for you, and they're overwhelmed and it's messy. So for the non-married millennials, still very important. For the ones who are married, especially with kids, or have kids and not married, even crucially more important. And then, one other caveat we'll throw in there are for the folks who live in community property states. So these are states like Louisiana, Texas, where they don't operate in common law. So essentially, the long story short is how do they process things? Well, whatever you owned before you were married is still yours. Whereas in a common law state like North Carolina, or South Carolina or Virginia, in our states, if I'm married, everything goes to my spouse. So it makes it a little bit easier if I don't have a will. But you live in Texas, you live in Louisiana, if you have, you know, a investment account with $50,000 in it, a home you bought before you were married, and if you die without a will, your spouse does not technically get those things outright. They're going to go to either that person's parents or siblings, and that can be a very messy thing. So again, yep, the idea of it's only there for the wealthy is because generally, people have this persona that estate planning is, oh, I have $10 million. How am I going to make the world better? My grandkids get half. My alma mater gets a quarter, and then I leave the other quarter to, the Cancer Research Association of America or whatever. But ultimately, if you own anything, estate planning is important to do.
What would a basic, like the most basic plan a 25-year-old millennial with very few assets should have who's single?
Yeah, basic plan should definitely have power of attorneys. So healthcare as well as financial. So again, this is somebody or somebody's who can make those decisions for you. They can pay your bills. If you're in the hospital, they can make decisions for you. With that, your health directives, if you're in a coma, do you want to be resuscitated, or the common term is the DNR, do not resuscitate. And then again, the will, naming the parties, executor, who's going to handle my stuff for me. If you have assets, who's going to be a trustee? And then again, if you don't have kids, you don't need to worry about guardianship provisions. But with the will, you want to make sure you name, hey, out of all my stuff, my baseball card collection, my pet cockatoo, where are these things going? Those are important provisions to have in a will. So simply, yep, just a simple will, as well as those healthcare pieces and power of attorneys are the most simple thing to have done. And that can cover 90% of the people out there, in all honesty.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was assuming that the best time to start is now, right? Today or yesterday, but second best is today. But typically, when do people in your experience, your clients, start this kind of planning? Because for me, it would make the most sense once you get married, right? I would, because say if I started one last year and divvied it up, I would need to revisit and redo it because now I am married with a spouse. So does it make most sense to kind of start it when you're thinking of those things with the spouse? Because once you have a spouse, it's very different than just immediate family.
Yeah, so definitely, I'd say the two biggest areas where people say, "Okay, I need to get a will done now," are they have children. That's that big primer, like, "Oh my gosh, someone is dependent on me." And then also as they get older, that kind of retirement time frame. People I've worked with clients who are 60 years old and they're like, "We've never had a will before, but we need one now because we might die soon." Um, so that's the big thing. But I definitely think, to your point, Will, it's like, okay, if you're single, you're not yet married, do you want to get a will and then have to redo it again? In those circumstances, I think it is a very minor thing where it still benefits you. Now, if you're planning to get married, like in your case, within a year, I would say, hey, wait. Knock on wood, hopefully nothing happens to you, but in this case, wait. If possible, you could go ahead and get some beneficiary designations changed, and that's something we'll talk about too. But I would say if you're single and you may get married, you may not. It may be 2 years, maybe 10 years. I'd say definitely get a will done because then you can always do a codicil or an amendment to that will. That's very easy to do. And when we got ours done, my wife and I, we've been married almost, it'll be 13 years in 2 weeks. We take our wheel out, kind of every election cycle, every 4 years. And what do we need to change, if anything? And we actually just went through this probably about 2 months ago. And our lives hadn't changed significantly, but I forgot a lot of stuff in there. Like I was like, oh, yeah, I had this person named or this. So every 4 years is a good time, if you do have your will done, to at least dust it off and see, am I good? Do I need to change anything? And then something too is if the legislative laws around estate planning have changed as well, that's a prime time to review what you have.